Burrito here. If you're watching this video, it means that you have to complete the communication training. Whether you've been out of the country or missed it, we hope that this video will help you gain a better understanding of why having developed communication skills and knowing how to use them at camp is really important for all of our counselors and just how it makes us all together a better team. So, just to kind of overview of what this workshop's going to look like, our goal is to give you guys a solid foundation of some of the skills that are specific to working with campers that we have at Camp Kesem. And just a thing to note is that these skills will not only help you to feel more prepared, but it'll really facilitate a positive experience for our kids as well. And it'll make working with each other and with the kids a lot easier and it'll go a lot more smoothly. Other thing to keep in mind is that this is the kind of session where there are not a lot of wrong answers. So unfortunately, this workshop, kind of like a lot of the other ones that we have, are intended to be a lot more interactive, kind of to be done in a group. But I'm going to still try to make them as engaging as possible and kind of turn the question on you guys as you're listening and watching this video, just to consider, like, what are some things you can think about, and just remember that there aren't any wrong answers. Whatever you think based on your own experiences, things that you've learned about communication, about why having those skills is so important, really anything that you can bring from your prior experience and then combining that with what you gain from this workshop will be really helpful for you at camp. And then again, to go over the 3 sections of communication that we're going to cover in this workshop, we have nonverbal communication, active listening, and clear self-expression. So let's jump in. Again, not going to make you do this physically unless you want to go grab a piece of paper, but let's say that I give you this list of instructions, or I kind of yell out these instructions, either with your physical piece of paper or imaginary piece of paper. Fold the paper in half, then fold the top corner down, fold the other corner down, fold it in half again, fold the first side out, fold the other side out. We go through this list of instructions, it might be kind of confusing at first. What is it that we're trying to make? A lot of these instructions don't really have a lot of clarity, like, well, is it the right side or left side? Which way do we fold it in half? I don't know if you remember from like kindergarten, first grade, like hot dog or hamburger style. So people that might have experience that connects to what this is kind of might help you to already understand that we're trying to make a paper airplane, as you can see here. But if you're like me and don't really have a lot of experience making paper airplanes, if I were doing this, I probably would get kind of frustrated, not really know exactly what I should be doing with these instructions, how I should be kind of actually acting them out myself. So let's say that we scratch that idea, because obviously this may work for some people, but for the majority of people it would probably get pretty confusing, especially in a big group. Let's say that we start over and let's just walk through it. So imagine in your head that I'm there with you in person, and you have a piece of paper, I have a piece of paper, and I'm just kind of taking you step by step through each direction and showing you how it's supposed to look. If we were to do this, it would probably be a lot clearer what you're supposed to be making. As you see that I do it, you would be able to understand, oh, so like it's starting to look like a paper airplane. This is what we're trying to do here. So you kind of think about it for a second. What is the importance of having this more direct kind of like showing method of communication rather than maybe just yelling out instructions that people don't understand, especially if they don't have the context to understand it? So what does this activity highlight? What are some of the key components to really, really great communication? And as you kind of think of some ideas on your own, we can also tap into these ideas. Nonverbal communication can be really helpful. So I walked you through the second time around. I walked you through making the paper airplane. maybe might not have used words at all, just that showing method can be really helpful. Active listening. If you were taking in what I was saying, but not really applying it to what you were doing, that might get pretty confusing and pretty frustrating. So being able to actively engage with what I'm kind of instructing you to do, and actually do it yourself can be really helpful. And then finally, clear self-expression. So if I'm doing a horrible job communicating to you guys what you're supposed to be doing, making this paper airplane, kind of like what we saw up here, just listing off instructions, not helpful at all. Burrito did a bad job doing that. But the second time around, maybe I had some instructions that accompanied what I was showing you guys to do, and I was a lot clearer, fold the right side down, fold the left side down, fold the paper in half in a particular way. It would be a lot less confusing, and you guys would be able to understand and learn more from what I'm instructing you to do. So this workshop, again, will cover these 3 methods of communication that are absolutely key to your success at camp, working with your co-counselors, with unit leaders, with other people from the admin team, and with your campers too. This type of communication is absolutely key. So we're going to start with nonverbal communication. So again, we can't actually act this out. If you have someone there with you and you want to try out some of these activities with that person, feel free to. I do think that it might be a little bit more helpful to see it in person, but again, we'll definitely walk through these in detail so you can kind of get an idea of what we're getting at. But just kind of going through this next section. So what even is communication? Well, the dictionary definition of communication is that it's the activity of conveying information through the exchange of thoughts, messages, or information, as by speech, visuals, signals, writing, or behavior. And all communication requires a sender, a message that is to be sent, and a recipient. But the receiver does not necessarily need to be aware already of the sender's intent to communicate at the time of communication. Thus, communication can occur across vast distances in time and space. So think about any time that you've, communicated with someone, whether it's having a conversation with someone. There's this funny thing, I don't know if you've seen it, but I think it's a meme about some person, I can't even remember, scratch that, sorry. But just if you're texting a friend and you're in the same room and then your friend says why'd you just text me? You're trying to communicate something, swept under the rug a little bit. They obviously didn't get that, but that's an attempt at communication. So just things like that. So looking back at these examples, so picture someone slouched in their chair versus someone leaning forward, listening really intently, or someone rolling their eyes and sighing, or maybe someone texting, while there's someone talking to them, someone bouncing their leg or being otherwise very fidgety, nodding their head, or maybe frowning and looking concerned or concentrating very hard. So just kind of a mix of different ways that people can interact with someone while they're communicating, but they all send very, very different signals. So going down to this question, what nonverbal cues do you notice about some of these examples? Again, obviously feel free to think of some on your own, but I'll go through some really quick. So if someone's slouched in their chair, maybe it means that they're tired and they're not really listening, or maybe they're bored and they don't care to listen. Leaning forward, listening intently shows that someone's very engaged. Someone rolling their eyes and sighing, again, maybe bored, maybe annoyed. Either way shows that they don't really want to be there or be participating in this communication. Someone texting, same thing, obviously it depends on the situation, but typically texting while you're talking to someone comes across as they don't really care, or that you're not really wanting to be there. Bouncing your leg or being otherwise fidgety. Maybe you have somewhere to be, maybe you're stressed about getting somewhere on time or something else going on. But again, it kind of reinforces the idea that, you're not really there fully mentally. You're not really engaged. Nodding your head, again, I think this is similar to leaning forward and listening intently. It shows that, yeah, like you are listening. It's your nonverbal way of showing people that you're there. You are present in the situation and you want to have that conversation or whatever it is with that person. I think frowning can go either way. So maybe if depends on the context. If you're having some happy conversation with someone and you're frowning, kind of looking off, maybe something else might be on your mind. You're not really fully present in the situation. But if someone's relaying something to you that they're concerned about, maybe looking concerned or concentrating, making good eye contact, could show that, yeah, you're concerned too. You're there for them and you're willing to listen and help out with the situation. So again, some of those nonverbal cues will all send a very particular message, and that message, sorry about that, that message will have a very different effect on the person that you're communicating with. So I'm not going to give you guys a bunch of time for discussion, but please continue to think about these things as we move through this workshop. So we're going to go over to this nonverbal communication handout, and it kind of goes through over some of the principles of nonverbal communication. And again, won't give you much time to actually do this unless you have someone to do it with. Feel free to pause the video. You can go ahead and act it out. But as we go over these principles, just be thinking about some of the ways that you can apply these principles in real life situations that you might have with your campers. So important to note is that nonverbal cues make up more than half of what we understand from what someone says. So your body language and, your eye contact, your openness, where you're facing, your facial expressions, things like that play into other people's, but particularly for us, your campers' judgment and attitude about what you are saying. And this is really important because if you want to make that special connection with your camper, the more that you're showing using these nonverbal cues that you're engaged, the better success you're going to have. And this is kind of tying back to that you might develop a critical opinion, or whether it's positive or even a negative attitude about what you are saying, or maybe even who you are to take it a step further because of inconsistent messages in your body language. So the 7 principles are proximity, kinesics, posture, gesture, and we'll go over what each of these different principles means in detail. So proximity is understanding how people use and perceive the space around them. So personal space versus public space, how to use a space around you, and how it affects the messages that we are sending. So maybe the closer you are to someone, and again, these are tricky sometimes because we're all individual people. We all have our own preferences and ways of communicating. But you can kind of draw, and you'll have to put that into practice, particular to whatever camper or counselor you're interacting with, and just kind of being aware of your surroundings and what they do and do not respond well to. But, if you're standing super, super far away from someone, they might get the impression that you don't really want to be interacting with them, or if you're standing too close, that might make them uncomfortable. So yeah, just proximity to the person that you're communicating with is an important principle. Kinesics is a fancy way of saying body movement. This includes your arms, hands, torso, facial expressions, and body orientation. So kind of some of those nonverbal cues that I talked about before. These movements can all affect how your message is heard and understood, particularly facial expressions. So if you look like you're bored, that's going to come across. If you look like you're super happy and engaged and interested, that'll come across. Or maybe if you're interacting with someone that you don't particularly like, it can be seen on your face. So being aware of the types of facial expressions that you're making is really important. Sometimes you will see people that use their hands a lot while they talk. I know you can't see me right now, but as I'm explaining these things, I'm using my hands. I like to talk with my hands and my arms. Some people are shy and tend to look down and shuffle their feet or twirl their thumbs a little bit maybe when they communicate with others. That's all part of kinesics. posture can be used to determine your degree of detention, involvement, and interest. So it kind of ties back to this whole body movement thing a little bit, but it gives a very clear indication of caring, respect, and fondness. This is really, really important. I mean, these are all important principles, but someone that leans in, sits up, angles their body towards the activity, it really, really shows someone that you're interested, you're excited to be there, and you really care about having that conversation or interaction with that person. And again, kind of tying back into that, when you have this, or when you're listening, if you have a very attentive posture, this conveys through this nonverbal communication that your words are important to me. And this is something that we always, always want to focus on with camp. We want to make all of our campers feel validated in their experiences, their interests, whatever it may be. This is showing that you're engaged and that what they're telling you is really, really important to you, is important to us, that you guys are able to do that. So moving on to gestures. These are nonverbal body movements that communicate a specific meaning. So high-fiving someone, says, hey, good job, or hey, good to see you. Nodding, winking, giving a thumbs up, giving an okay movement, and waving are all good examples of, gestures that people might use to show that, hey, it's good to see you, or hey, I'm happy to have you here, or waving hi, waving goodbye. You kind of get where I'm going with this. Eye contact in most Western cultures, and this is really important since we are, again, I'll say this a few times over these trainings, but we're an inclusive environment, which means that we have people from a lot of different cultures. This is not only Western cultures, but, in Western cultures, as in America, we are part of a Western culture. Eye contact with another person shows respect, interest, and confidence, and it shows that you care enough to focus on the message you're hearing and delivering. However, this is another area where kind of paying attention to those individual cultural differences is really important because, yeah, in America, we are part of Western culture, but America is also made up of so many countless different cultures. So you might have campers that, don't have this same tendency within the culture that they're a part of. So just, kind of paying attention and keying into what your campers do and do not respond well to will be important. Haptics is another word for physical contact, and something that we might see at camp would be a safe and reassuring touch. And this is important because it can send the message of care and attention. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about the whole love language thing, but there are different ways that people either express love or receive love well, and for some people, physical touch, it can be a really important thing. So again, this safe and reassuring touch, like a tap on the back or a warm handshake or a high five, something like that can be really important. Other people don't like physical contact, so again, just recognizing that there will be differences and figuring out what your campers do and do not like. But if your campers do respond well to physical contact, it can add a lot of depth and clarity to your message. Again, as part of this nonverbal communication, having that sort of physical expression of showing you care reinforces what you might be saying to say, yeah, I really care and I'm here for you. And it can help a lot of campers feel more comfortable with you. Once again, not always the case, but for a lot of campers, it makes them feel good. Since we are a camp, we're not part of these campers, family or really close friends, we do have a set of rules for appropriate physical contact, and this is what they are. So you can put a hand on our camper's shoulder, you can put a hand on their head, on their upper back, around their shoulder, one hand around each shoulder standing face to face. You can hug campers, but it's important to recognize that not all campers want to be hugged. So maybe letting them come to you, running up and saying, or asking, can I give you a hug? But the EOTs go over this a little bit in depth about what you can and can't do with our campers. But, piggyback rides or sitting on laps, those can sometimes be a little questionable, especially depending on hand placement, and we don't ever want to do something, even if it's not intentionally, that might make a camper feel uncomfortable. So just if you're not sure, stick to, some of these, and then hugs if it's okay with the camper, in terms of physical contact with our campers. And the final principle that we'll go over is presence. And, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before throughout, but being present, showing that when you're speaking or listening, you're really there. You're mindfully there. You're physically there. You are engaged with what's going on. It's only really when we're present in the moment and paying attention to the cues and feedback that campers are giving us that we can then be conscious of and manipulate all of the other nonverbal communication skills we've covered in this module. So the more that you're engaged, the more that you can be aware of, your own kind of facial emotion that you're showing on your face, or whether it's like an appropriate time to maybe give a camper a pat on the back. That engagement and that showing that you're interested and that actually being interested rather than just expressing it is key to having a form of successful nonverbal communication. And this awareness can be even more heightened when you remove distractions. So this will lead to you being more conscientious of your own body language and deliver a very clear message. So there's a lot of things going on around you. If you're distracted, if there's maybe a few problems that have come up and you feel like you have to be here and there and all over the place trying to help out, maybe, give yourself a moment, take a step back, find a quieter place off to the side that you can communicate with your camper or with your co-counselor, whoever it may be. So just to kind of go over them again, the 7 principles are right here. And feel free, again, we will make these handouts available to you guys so you can always look back and review what any of these definitions mean. Okay, going back to the workshop. We're going to move on to active listening. We are going to, obviously we can't play these actual icebreaker games, but icebreakers are a really, really good way for you to get to know your campers, for your campers to get to know you, and overall will just make at least the very beginning of camp a lot more successful. And they're useful too when at times when you have downtime. They're not only good for getting to know people, although you'll never get to know your campers enough. There's always chances to find out more about people, but they're a good way to just have fun too, doing things together. So I'm just going to kind of go over a few of these games. We can make this available to you guys, or they will be available to you guys, so you can look over them again before you want to go to camp. Yeah, if you see one that you really like, it might be good, maybe to kind of learn how it goes, that way you can bring it to camp and play it with some of your campers. Okay, so I'm going to go to Jedi Numbers, just because that was one of the recommended ones. These are all a lot of fun, too. Get down to it. Okay. So this game goes, you stand, all stand in a circle, and you look down, you don't look at anyone in the eyes, and you set a numeric goal for the group to reach. So maybe start with 15, it's kind of a low number, and explain to the group that once the activity begins, participants can only say a number. So you can't talk about anything else, you can't talk about any other form of strategy, only say one number. Once a leader says go, someone, just whoever decides to start off the game in the group, will start by saying 1. Someone different will say 2. And you kind of keep going up like this. So 1, 2, 3, each person saying a different number until you get to this starting goal of 15 or whatever number you choose to start with. The challenge is that if more than one person calls out a number at the same time, the group needs to start over at the beginning. And since there's not a set order, this happens a lot. Everyone is excited to participate, everyone wants to contribute to the group's success, but being that enthusiastic maybe means that people yell out a number, and this, like it says here, this will happen over and over again. And can get a little frustrating if you get, let's say, to 14 and you make it all the way up there and then two people say 14 at once. You have to start over. So it's fun, but it can be a little aggravating. So, this is a great game that really exemplifies the use of some of those nonverbal communication skills that we talked about, but also this active listening that we're going to go into. And just as a variation, you can give the group a time limit to reach the highest possible number. If you don't want to set a starting number, just want to go as long as you guys can. So feel free, please. All of these games, actually, I encourage you to, if you want to find a group to play them with, and then do this reflection afterwards about what aspects of communication were useful in this game, but maybe what are some of the aspects of communication that I wasn't able to use that might have made it a little bit harder for me to successfully complete this game. Reflecting on that will kind of help make you more aware of not only how this comes up in games that we'll play at camp, but how it might come up in other situations with campers at camp. So, what made this challenging? What helped you to be successful? Even though you couldn't talk about it, how did you communicate the successful strategy? And how is this working with each other at camp? So let's say, in the game, maybe you give someone a look that in that look you're communicating, okay, I'm going to go next. So even though you don't say, I'm going to go next, you're able with your body language and with your eye contact and your emotional or facial expressions, express to them okay, I'm going to go next, so don't say the same numbers. That way we can keep going upwards. Or maybe you raise hands when you're going to say something. That way people know not to say something or say a number at the same time as you. So things like that, all part of nonverbal communication that will be really useful at camp and at these games too. So to go back here, again, not only nonverbal communication, but what active listening skills did you use during this activity? What was the most challenging part when it comes to listening? So just to go over what active listening even is, it's a set of skills that allow you to understand, retain, and then act on what is being said. So through maybe some of these forms of nonverbal communication that we used in the Jedi game, you're able to understand what that person was saying, retain, and then act on, or not act in this case by not raising your hand, on what is being communicated or said. So just to go here really quick, go over what active listening is. We have this handout. So active listening is acknowledgement. And here are some of the things that it is not. It's not necessarily always agreeing or sharing the same experience. A lot of people sometimes do this to seem relatable or make it seem like they're really engaged, and it can be this depending on the situation. But it really is more so just showing that you're engaged and that you are taking in what that other person is saying, not necessarily saying something yourself. It's also not judgment or solutions or advice. It's not criticizing, it's not questioning, and it's not ignoring. So especially in here, I think sometimes I'm definitely guilty of this too. If I have a friend that comes to me with a problem, I'll try to give them advice or offer them some sort of solution just because it feels like it's the way I can be most helpful to them. But that might not always be the case. Sometimes just being there and being a person that they can come to that will listen to whatever they have going on is a really, really great way to communicate and can be more helpful than responding. Some techniques are nonverbal listening responses. So, sorry guys. So this might be showing some of those facial expressions, or maybe that warm pat on the back. Expresses. It doesn't have to be said, but it expresses that sounds hard. I'm here for you. If there's anything you need from me, just let me know. All in one action. Maybe paraphrasing what they said. Again, responding isn't always the answer, but it can be the answer. It might show someone that, wow, you really listened and you were able to pick up on the key points that I was trying to communicate. It means a lot to me that you're there and that you for clarification. So if you're confused by anything that person said, say, hey, actually, I missed that part. Can you go over it? And even if you might have missed it the first time around, this shows them that you care enough to want to understand fully what they're saying. Um, Maybe reflect the underlying feelings. So trying to get at, try to empathize and understand, what might be some of the feelings or emotions that they're experiencing because of this. And reflect that. Say, wow, that sounds hard. I'm sure this must make you angry. Or even, I'm sure this must make you happy. Let me share in that emotion with you and show you that I'm actively there and I care. Um, Confirm that your understanding is correct. So this can be really important when we're planning something just between us counselors and something along those lines, when maybe instructions weren't quite clear, but it can be really helpful to go back and say, I think this is what's going on. I think this is these are the rules and how this is supposed to go, but I'm not sure. Can you verify that I am understanding correctly? And then if not, you'll be able to get more information and be clarified, and that'll be helpful. And then kind of prodding and asking, is there anything else? This can be great when you're helping someone, showing, hey, like, I'm here. I'm absolutely can do what you're asking of me, but is there anything else I can do for you? And this is also really helpful. It connects back to the whole being a team player that we talked about before in our leadership training. Showing that, I'm here to help, but like I'm also willing to do anything else you might need me at the moment is a really great active listening technique. And then finally, to go over some active listening tips that will be helpful to you guys. And these definitely connect back to some of the nonverbal ways of communication that we've already talked about. But, facing the person whom you're listening to. Keep your body language open. Maintain good eye contact. Nod. Give short verbal responses like, uh-huh, I see, okay. Maybe even remaining silent for a moment to give the person a chance to respond. So not always being so quick to respond, but showing that you're really there. If you are not clear on something, the speaker said, ask for clarification with open-ended questions that begin with what, how much, tell me, describe, or explain, rather than yes or no, because it shows that you're open and willing to learn rather than just kind of shortly getting at the main points and trying to move forward. So paraphrasing what the person has said to check for understanding. So start with something like, so you're saying, or let me make sure I understand what you are saying. And then finally, acknowledge the emotions of the person you are actively listening to. This is a great way to convey that you're really trying to understand what that person is saying saying to you. So maybe say, you seem to feel angry about, or I hear that you are sad about, or I bet that's really hard. Does this make you feel blah, blah, blah? Like, how can I help you? These are all really, really great tips for actively listening to people that you're communicating with. And again, active listening in general is just a really, really key component of successful communication with people that you're working with. So, again, just maybe quickly do this on your own, but either physical listening skills or intellectual listening skills. Some of the things that we went over in the active listening handout are kind of correspond to both of these things. So physically listening to someone, what is your body doing? What is your face doing? How are you showing them that you're engaged and that you're actively listening to what they're saying? And then intellectually, some of those responses that we talked about, like trying to understand the emotion they're going through, or saying, yeah, that sounds hard. Just kind of those not full-blown responses, but letting them respond and still expressing verbally that you're engaged. These are all ways to show that you're intellectually there and that you're willing to listen. So feel free, as always, to think about more of these examples of these on your own, but they all tie back to active listening, and active listening, I think, personally, is one of the most important components of communication for us at camp and just in general. And then the last aspect of communication that we're going to cover in this workshop is clear self-expression. And clear self-expression is about making sure that what you say is well understood by the people that are listening to you. So how do you think you might do that? I think sometimes it's easy for us to think that we explain something really well, or, maybe on the other side, even acknowledging, yeah, I didn't explain that well. But how can you actually check in to make sure that what you said made sense and was understood by the people that you were communicating with? So again, feel free to think of some things on your own, but just to highlight some things that you might do to check that people understood what you said would be to write things down. So that way, these people, when they look back, it'll be like they just experienced you talking to them or communicating with them. And writing things down helps to organize your thoughts and help you remember. Practice talking about it. So when you have a couple, when you have a moment to talk about something and talk it out, it can change and evolve to be more accurate and effective. So that way, when you go to actually communicate with that person or with that group, it'll come across a lot more straightforward and to the point. It cut out the unnecessary details that might be. Instead, use nonverbal cues or writing things out, drawing things out. Sometimes we over communicate simple ideas, so using less words to talk about things or to write out things can be really, really helpful. You might also want to ask to check in. By asking yourself, it shows that you care. And it places the importance again. It shows that you care about what you just said. You think it's important. You want to make sure that everyone else is understanding it too, that you care enough that they are understanding it to be able to apply whatever you said or do whatever you said, whatever the situation is. So just going forward, what might some of the categories of phrases and statements be that we say to most kids? I'm just going to scroll down right here. So some of the categories are rules, instructions, directions, expectations, guidance, etc., so on and so forth. This can be helpful sometimes when you really need to get the point across, but I think that when all we're saying to kids are kind of follow along these, this set of categories, it can get kind of boring, and it can feel like we're just being very stringent and telling them to do things rather than communicating with them in a more useful way. So we're going to go to this Don't Talk About the Rules handout. And this handout outlines creating positive experiences and giving effective directions rather than just shouting out directions and maybe not having as effective a form of communication. So we're just going to go through this really quickly. Okay. So let's say that we just did some sort of activity. One way to create positive expectations and effective directions is to say something make some positive remark about the activity, or not necessarily an activity that we did as a group, but something that a camper did that you really appreciate them doing. Say, wow, this was great. Thank you so much for doing this. Then go on and ask questions. What are we supposed to do? How do we do it? When we ask questions, most kids respond with negative rules. So use this opportunity to rephrase things into positive expectations. So by asking a camper, well, what do you think we're supposed to do here? How do we do this in a great way? This leaves it very open-ended and gives kids an opportunity to talk to you about their understanding of things. What should we try and remember, or what are the rules? So you may have to work to rephrase your questions into the positive. Rather than saying don't do this or don't do that, which a lot of times is how rules are phrased, it might be more helpful to instead say well, we can do this and we can do that. It will help make kids more excited about things. It will help make kids more engaged, and it'll help them more clearly understand and look forward to activities that you're going to complete. And then finally, rephrase, support, and clarify their answer, and then gently ask them why. So if they've just given you a response to what you asked, what are we supposed to do? They say, oh, we're supposed to do this, this, and this. Again, as long as you've ensured that they're thinking about it from a positive standpoint rather than the negative rules like don't do this, don't do that, then go ahead and ask them why or how come. Why do we do it this way? It gets kids thinking about the consequences and creates ownership so that it makes it seem like to them they've come up with this on their own, so that they then feel responsible to behave this way as well. And it helps them understand and get more involved. It also, again, just reinforces the idea that they have the power to make their own choices. At camp, it's not just us always telling them what to do. They have some freedom to make choices themselves, as to how they're going to behave, how they're going to engage. And if we're reinforcing this positive idea of this, it helps them to take that positive perspective rather than the negative one, and kind of uplift them to make those beneficial choices. And finally, we tap into their own knowledge and understanding. So again, by asking questions, asking them to explain why, this ultimately will help us understand everything that they're understanding, and can help us to clarify anything to them that they might need some help with. So going back here, just using those skills that we went over, how might they be helpful to you in situations like this at camp? Again, if you have someone there with you and you want to practice this technique, go for it. We have a bunch of these situations here that I'll walk through really quickly. But kind of, let's say that you have a set of rules. How can you really clearly convey those rules, but still make it fun, still make it lighthearted, and do it in a way that's essentially, quote unquote, not talking about the rules. Turn it into a positive experience. Ask kids why. Give them ownership of what they're doing. So in playing kickball, or in painting at arts and crafts, in doing tie-dye, in playing small group games like Secret Center, brushing your teeth. This can be big with the little kids, making it fun for them, making it not like, oh, I have to do this because it's a rule for me, but giving them ownership, asking, well, why do we do this? Okay, well, what can we do to make it more fun? Giving them the ability to come up with their own creative ideas to do it just makes the whole experience better for everyone. And it will get your kids to brush their teeth, which is always important. Maybe going into the dining hall for a meal, walking from one activity to the next, singing a camp song. So thinking about how these might come into play and be helpful when you're at camp specifically. I'll go through one example in detail, just since if you don't have the time to role play, you kind of get how it's actually applied. But again, this will come to be very useful while you're at camp. So let's go ahead and do with tie-dyeing, just for fun. So let's say that a kid is tie-dyeing a shirt, but is not being very careful about where the dye is going. He's getting it all over his hands, all over his own clothes, and you don't want to ruin too many of their clothes, or else their parents might not be too happy. So come over, walk over to them, maybe pick out something positive they're doing. Let's say they have a really cool design going. So you could say, hey, I love the design you're doing. What are you, what are you making for your tie-dye? What type of pattern or what colors are you wanting to use? Let them respond, show that active listening, use your nonverbal skills to respond, and then maybe ask questions. You could say something like, well, cool, that's really awesome. I noticed, though, that you're kind of getting your dye all over the place. Again, be very lighthearted and positive about it. You don't want to make the kids feel bad. Can you show me, how you think we're supposed to use tie-dye? What's, the best way to do it? And kind of maybe let them show you, maybe let them walk through it. Again, if they're saying, well, I'm not supposed to get the dye all over the place, or I'm not supposed to splash around the bucket, whatever it is, say, yeah, but what you can do instead is, you can dip it in this color, you can tie a rubber band here, or do all these different things. It helps to give them ideas about what they can do rather than just what they can't do, and it gets them more excited about continuing with the activity. Ask, what should we try and remember, or what are the rules? And again, here, just rephrasing into the positive. And then finally, rephrase, support, clarify their answers, and then gently ask, maybe say something like, yeah, cool, well, it sounds like you understand that, we have to be careful to keep the dye in the bucket, not get it too much all over our clothes or our hands, and that we can also put rubber bands in cool places and make a lot of fun different designs. Maybe then ask them why, how come, some consequences if it's something serious. Maybe say like, they might even on their own, come up with, well, like I don't want to ruin my clothes, and I still want to be able to have fun with this activity. So again, this might be a really successful way to redirect behavior and very clearly communicate with your campers why, why we do this, why we have rules for tie-dyeing in a certain way. So yeah, again, just going over the 3 components of successful communication. We have nonverbal communication. Second, we have active listening. And then third, we have clear self-expression. So just remember that these are all skills that you can work at in your day-to-day lives, but also ones that will be really, really helpful for you at camp, whether you're communicating with co-counselors, with admin team, with campers, whatever it is. But there's so many situations in which being able to successfully communicate and leave everyone feeling very positive and happy is really, really important. So, if you have any more questions about this workshop, feel free to ask, reach out as always. We have these handouts that we can make accessible to you guys if you want to keep thinking of more scenarios or ways to apply what you've just learned. But don't forget to take the quiz once you're done watching this video, and I will talk to you guys very soon in another training. Bye guys, love you.